The first round of closures, which is projected to be about 80 to 100 stores, will close by the end of this year, with a total of 200 locations closing in the next 18 months.
That shrimp you're about to order might have been sitting in a dirty ice bath for days. Your fresh salmon could be weeks old and pumped with chemicals. Before you take another bite of seafood at these popular chains, you need to know what former employees are finally revealing about what really happens in their kitchens. The seafood industry has a dirty secret that restaurant chains don't want you to discover. While you're paying premium prices for what you think is fresh catch, the reality behind those kitchen doors tells a completely different story. Former cooks, managers, and health inspectors are breaking their silence about practices that could turn your dinner into a health hazard faster than you can say catch of the day. We're talking about seafood that's been frozen for months, thawed in contaminated water, and served with a smile. Fish that's pumped with so many chemicals, it barely qualifies as food anymore. Shrimp that's been sitting at dangerous temperatures while busy servers pretend everything is perfectly fresh. These aren't isolated incidents at sketchy roadside joints. These are systematic problems at restaurants you probably trust, places where millions of Americans eat seafood every single week. The numbers are staggering. Food safety violations at major seafood serving chains have increased by 37% over the past 3 years, with improper storage and temperature control leading the list of violations. Yet most customers have no idea what they're really eating when they order that grilled salmon or shrimp scampi. You deserve to know the truth before your next dinner out becomes your next doctor visit. Let's start with America's most famous seafood chain, where the reality behind those endless shrimp promotions might just kill your appetite forever. Red Lobster built its reputation on the promise of fresh, quality seafood served in a family-friendly atmosphere. But behind those nautical decorations and endless shrimp promotions lies a reality that might make you rethink your next Cheddar Bay biscuit craving. Here's what Red Lobster doesn't advertise. 85% of their seafood arrives frozen and pre-cooked, including those fresh lobster tails that cost you $30. Former employees from locations across 14 states have confirmed that what you think is fresh catch has actually been sitting in industrial freezers for months before reaching your plate. The thawing process is where things get truly disturbing. Multiple former cooks have reported seafood left sitting in room temperature water for hours, creating the perfect breeding ground for bacteria. One ex-manager from a Florida location described finding shrimp that had been thawing since morning still sitting in lukewarm water at dinner service. That's not food preparation, that's food poisoning waiting to happen. Health department records from 23 Red Lobster locations show repeated violations for improper seafood storage temperatures. In Ohio alone, inspectors found seafood stored at 55 degrees, 15 degrees above the safe limit. A former prep cook revealed that the famous shrimp cocktail often sits in melted ice mixed with cleaning runoff from nearby stations. Temperature logs from multiple locations show a pattern of violations that corporate seems unable to fix. When seafood costs this much, you expect better than frozen mystery meat reheated in questionable conditions. But if you think Red Lobster's frozen seafood practices are concerning, wait until you hear what's happening at restaurants where raw fish preparation becomes an art of deception. At Benihana, the sizzling theatrics and flying shrimp are designed to dazzle you. But while you're watching the chef's knife work, you might miss what's really happening to your seafood before it hits that flaming grill. The sushi-grade fish that Benihana uses for both their sushi bar and hibachi tables often sits in storage at temperatures that would make a health inspector cringe. Former employees from 11 locations across California and Texas report finding fish stored at 45 degrees or higher, well above the 38-degree maximum for safe sushi preparation. That yellowtail you're eating raw might have been breeding bacteria for hours. The hibachi cooking process creates its own set of problems. Chefs are under intense pressure to time their performance perfectly, which means seafood often gets undercooked to prevent it from becoming rubbery during the show. A former chef from a Las Vegas location revealed that shrimp frequently comes off the grill with cold centers because fully cooking it would ruin the presentation timing. Even more disturbing are the employee testimonials about reusing seafood that customers sent back to the kitchen. One server described watching chefs scrape returned hibachi shrimp back onto the grill for the next table. The shared cooking surface creates another hazard, with raw seafood juices mixing with cooked rice and vegetables throughout the evening. Health Department records from 18 Benihana locations show repeated violations for cross-contamination and improper seafood temperatures. In New Jersey, inspectors found raw fish stored directly above cooked rice in the same cooler. The show might be entertaining, but when your dinner becomes a performance, food safety often takes a backseat to spectacle. When you order seafood at Applebee's, you're not getting anything close to fresh preparation. You're getting a microwave meal with table service, and the reality of how that fish reaches your plate should concern anyone who values their digestive health. The fish and chips that cost you $15 starts as frozen fish fillets that have been sitting in industrial freezers for 6 months or longer. Former kitchen staff from 19 locations across the Midwest report that these fillets arrive in plastic pouches and get microwaved directly in the packaging before being dumped into the fryer for a quick crisp. One ex-cook from Ohio described the fish as having the texture of wet cardboard after the microwave process. The shrimp scampi tells an even more disturbing story. Multiple employees have confirmed that freezer-burned shrimp, easily identified by their gray color and ice crystals, regularly gets used in pasta dishes. The solution? Heated in butter sauce until the off flavors are masked. A former manager from a Pennsylvania location admitted that expired shrimp often received new expiration labels during busy weekend shifts. Health inspection records from 27 Applebee's locations show a pattern of seafood temperature violations. During rush periods, seafood sits in the danger zone between 40 and 140 degrees for hours. Former servers report being told to serve seafood dishes even when the fish smelled questionable, with managers instructing them to add extra lemon to hide any off odors. The microwaves work harder than the chefs, and your seafood pays the price. When preparation shortcuts become standard practice, quality and safety both suffer dramatically. Joe's Crab Shack markets itself as a fun, casual spot for fresh seafood with a beachy vibe. But the reality behind their fresh catch claims reveals practices that would make any health-conscious diner think twice about cracking open those crab legs. Despite the coastal atmosphere and promises of daily fresh catches, most seafood at Joe's arrives frozen from overseas suppliers and sits in storage for weeks before reaching your table. Former employees from 16 locations across Texas and Florida report finding crab legs stored in the same ice machines used for fountain drinks, creating a contamination nightmare that violates basic food safety protocols. The storage areas tell an even more disturbing story. Multiple ex-workers have documented finding dead insects in seafood prep areas, with one former cook from a Georgia location posting photos of roaches in the crab storage bins. Health inspectors have cited Joe's Crab Shack locations 43 times in the past 2 years for improper seafood temperature control alone. The steaming process that's supposed to make everything safe often falls short. Former kitchen staff report inadequate steaming times that leave cold spots in shellfish, particularly in the center of large crab clusters. A health department inspection in Louisiana found surface temperatures of 160 degrees on crab legs with internal temperatures of only 90 degrees. Temperature logs from multiple locations show a pattern of violations during busy weekend shifts when seafood sits in warming trays far longer than safe guidelines recommend. When you're paying premium prices for what should be fresh shellfish, you deserve better than frozen imports with questionable handling. Fast food and seafood might seem like an impossible combination, but Long John Silver's has built an empire on deep-fried fish that barely qualifies as seafood. What they're serving you under that golden batter should make anyone question whether convenience is worth the health risks. The fish fillets that form the backbone of their menu contain only 60% actual fish, with the remaining 40% consisting of processing aids, fillers, and binding agents that help create the uniform shape and texture. Former employees from 21 locations across 8 states report that the fish arrives as frozen blocks that look more like construction material than food. The frying oil tells its own horror story. Multiple ex-workers have confirmed that oil gets used for weeks without changing, creating harmful compounds that give the fish a bitter aftertaste and dark color. Health inspectors in Kentucky found oil that tested positive for dangerous levels of trans fats and oxidation products. One former manager admitted that when the oil turned completely black, they would strain it and keep using it rather than replace it. Food safety violations are routine rather than exceptional. Former employees described fish dropped on floors getting rinsed off and served, and batter mix containing expired ingredients that creates off flavors and potential health risks. Temperature logs from 14 locations show fish held at unsafe temperatures for hours during busy periods. A leaked factory video from their major supplier revealed the fish paste process, where scraps get blended into a pink slurry, shaped and flash frozen. When your fish looks like a geometric shape, it probably started as processed paste rather than an actual fish. P.F. Chang's positions itself as upscale Asian fusion dining with seafood dishes that command premium prices. But behind the sleek decor and artfully plated presentations lies a web of chemical treatments and dangerous shortcuts that turn your expensive dinner into a chemistry experiment. The honey walnut shrimp that costs you $24 starts with shrimp that's been heavily treated with sodium triplophosphate, a chemical additive that makes seafood retain water weight and maintain an artificial plump appearance. Former prep cooks from 13 locations across California and New York report that treated shrimp feels unnaturally firm and has a slightly metallic taste that the sweet sauce is designed to mask. Even more concerning is the freeze-thaw cycle that seafood endures before reaching your plate. Multiple employees have documented seafood being thawed for prep, then refrozen when not used, sometimes repeating this process 3 or 4 times. Each cycle breaks down the protein structure and creates ideal conditions for bacterial growth. A former kitchen manager from a Chicago location described finding shrimp that had been through so many freeze-thaw cycles, it had the texture of wet cotton. Cross-contamination in prep areas creates additional risks. Health inspection records from 28 P.F. Chang's locations show repeated violations for raw seafood stored above ready-to-eat items and shared cutting boards between proteins. Former employees report intense pressure during busy periods to use seafood past its prime freshness rather than waste expensive inventory. Food safety audits from corporate inspectors found temperature violations at 67% of locations tested, with seafood spending dangerous amounts of time in the temperature danger zone. Olive Garden wants you to believe you're getting authentic Italian cuisine when you order their seafood pasta dishes. But the reality behind those endless breadsticks reveals a systematic approach to seafood preparation that prioritizes speed and cost-cutting over quality or safety. The shrimp in your $18 shrimp Alfredo arrives at the restaurant already cooked and frozen in industrial bags. Former line cooks from 32 locations across 12 states confirm that this pre-cooked shrimp gets reheated in microwaves before being dumped into pre-made Alfredo sauce. One ex-employee from a Texas location described the process as assembling a TV dinner with fancy plating. Salmon and other fish fare even worse in Olive Garden's walk-in coolers, where temperature control often fails during busy periods. Health inspection records from 41 locations show repeated violations for seafood stored at temperatures above 42 degrees. The salmon in their herb-grilled salmon dinner frequently sits in these improper conditions for hours before being served. The seafood Alfredo preparation creates a perfect storm of food safety violations. Multiple health inspectors have documented cross-contamination between raw seafood and dairy products, with the same utensils used for both without proper sanitization. Former kitchen staff report being pressured to use seafood that smells questionable during weekend dinner rushes, rather than waste expensive inventory. Temperature logs from corporate audits show that 73% of locations failed seafood storage requirements at least once during quarterly inspections. When your pasta costs this much, you expect better than reheated frozen seafood swimming in factory-made sauce. But even Italian-American chains with their assembly line kitchens can't compete with the shocking practices at this next restaurant. Outback Steakhouse built its reputation on perfectly grilled beef, but their seafood offerings tell a completely different story. When a steakhouse tries to serve seafood, the results can be more dangerous than you might expect from a restaurant that should stick to what it knows best. The coconut shrimp that costs you $16 gets fried in the same oil used for chicken tenders and other breaded items, creating a cross-contamination nightmare that violates basic food safety protocols. Former kitchen staff from 26 locations across 9 states report that this shared oil practice continues for weeks, with seafood and poultry proteins mixing in ways that can cause serious allergic reactions and foodborne illness. Salmon preparation reveals even more troubling practices. Multiple employees have documented salmon fillets being thawed improperly in room temperature water, leading to uneven thawing that creates hot and cold spots during cooking. A former grill cook from a Florida location described finding salmon with frozen centers and warm edges, a perfect breeding ground for harmful bacteria. Storage violations compound these preparation problems. Health inspection records from 37 Outback locations show lobster tails stored directly alongside raw beef in walk-in coolers, with seafood juices dripping onto other proteins. This violates every food safety protocol designed to prevent cross-contamination. Perhaps most disturbing are employee reports about being specifically trained to mask questionable seafood with extra seasoning rather than discard it. Former servers described being told to suggest extra lemon or cocktail sauce when fish smelled off, turning what should be quality control into a cover-up operation. When a restaurant prioritizes profit margins over food safety, your expensive dinner becomes a dangerous gamble that no amount of seasoning can fix. Now you know the truth about what's really happening behind the kitchen doors of these 9 popular restaurant chains. The evidence is overwhelming and undeniable. From Red Lobster's frozen seafood sitting in dirty ice baths to Outback Steakhouse training employees to mass spoiled fish with extra seasoning, these practices represent a systematic failure of food safety standards across the industry. The common threads are impossible to ignore. Temperature violations at over 60% of inspected locations. Seafood stored improperly for hours or even days. Cross-contamination between raw proteins and ready-to-eat foods. Employees pressured to serve questionable seafood rather than waste expensive inventory. Chemical treatments designed to hide deterioration rather than maintain freshness. These aren't isolated incidents or rogue employees making bad decisions. These are corporate policies and training procedures that put profit margins ahead of customer safety. When former managers admit to relabeling expired seafood and health inspectors find the same violations repeatedly at multiple locations, the problem goes far beyond individual restaurants. The financial impact tells its own story. Americans spend over $48 billion annually on seafood at restaurants. Yet foodborne illness cases linked to seafood have increased by 29% since 2022. You're paying premium prices for substandard products that could make you seriously ill. The solution isn't to never eat seafood again. It's to make informed choices about where you spend your money and what you're willing to accept. Independent restaurants with transparent sourcing practices, establishments that can tell you exactly when and where their fish was caught, and places where you can actually see the preparation process offer better alternatives. Your health and your wallet deserve better than frozen, chemically treated seafood served with a side of deception.